Hi, everybody, and welcome to Kristi Lee Uninterrupted. I am your host, Kristi Lee. Very excited about our guest this week. Former head writer for The Late Show with David Letterman, good friend of the Bob and Tom program. He's a novelist, former columnist for Sports Illustrated. He's a musician. He is going to be working on some radio things, actually, in the satellite radio world. And he's had some big changes over the last couple of years with David Letterman retiring. And he lost his wife about 10 months ago after a long illness. And we talk about that, plus a lot of other things, with the wonderful Bill Scheft. I am honored and pleased to have Bill Scheft joining us on the podcast today, all the way from New York City. Bill, how the heck are you?
I'm great, and it's great to be talking to you. And it's also great to have you alone, so I can tell you that all those other guys, they're just dragging you down. You were the whole deal on that show, and I'm free to now say what I've always felt, is that you were the reason people tuned in, and everybody else was just, you were carrying everybody else.
God love you, Bill Scheft. Thank you so much. We haven't spoken in quite a while. A lot of things have happened to you in the last year or so. Obviously,
Yes.
your boss, David Letterman, retiring, so that put you kind of what we call in the business on the street, if you will.
Yes.
So I'm kind of anxious to hear about what you've done in the last year or so. Also, sadly, you lost your wife of many, many years, Adrienne.
Right.
And you have now been a widower for almost 10 months. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Do you want to touch on that?
Yes, I do. And so first, the show ends 2 years ago in May. So it ends in May of 2015. And people told me this is going to be like a death, and because you were there for 24 years, and it felt less like a death than it did like a divorce, because all of a sudden you see these people, and that's the thing I miss the most of the people. And, you see them every day for 24 years, and then you don't, and they're, part of the firmament of your life. And the show is the show. I mean, the show was what brought us together, and but, the people were the real part of that. So that was very difficult to, and was still a lot of us, we still get together, which is great. We have a reunion coming up of the Late Show staff later this month, and that's always good until people start drinking a little too much. and then depending on your outlook, it either gets better or worse. But
because they aren't fearing
I've
for their
kept in
jobs
touch
anymore.
with a lot of people. We last April of 2017 was Dave's 70th birthday. So Barbara Gaines, the longtime executive producer of the show, and we put together a little dinner for Dave at the Friars Club, and it was about 16 longtime staffers. And Dave got up at the end and said, "This has been a wonderful evening. This is nothing that I would have sanctioned," which got a big laugh. And he said, "And as I look around the room, I see that I've made everyone here cry at least once over the years." And I guess that was his way of apologizing, but it was, that's how he opened his talk. And it was really kind of a sweet night. And, when we run across each other and, we all have that shared experience. And my friend Walter Kim, who was with the show for a long time, did a wonderful 2-part video called Leaving Letterman when he was at LinkedIn, and it featured a bunch of long-term staffers. And it was, I didn't really anticipate what it would be like being sort of spit out in the world at 59 and now 60, and being so closely associated to a man and a show. And now I'm out in the street. People ask me, what's it like being retired? I said, I'm not retired, I'm out of work. And I mean, I've kept busy, and as you well know, Kristi, if you're willing to work for free, you'll work for the rest of your life. And so I've kept busy, and so that took a long time to adjust to leaving, the urgency of the daily gig. And you were away from Bob and Tom for, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
Is that all of a sudden this urgency of the gig every day, this thing that kind of propelled you and gave you this momentum. Forget that it was a job or what it paid or whatever that was. It's this momentum that you have, and it's kind of this life force, and then that's snatched away, and you have to supply your own momentum. So that was difficult. And it wasn't like I wasn't busy or didn't have plenty to do. I did have plenty to do, and I was busy. And then I got very busy because my wife, who had been sick for a while, got very sick. And then I had to take care of her, and she would get a little better, and then she would. And then around this time, a year ago, it started to go, irrevocably the one way where you knew that this was kind of it. Mm-hmm. And her last full day, we kind of knew that there wasn't too much time, and she was very with it, and she was really funny to the end. I remember one day, three of her friends, three women, came in to visit her, and she was sleeping, and all three of the women happened to be dressed in black, and they came and they were standing at the foot of her bed.
Oh my.
And she woke up and saw these three women dressed in black, and she said, "Where am I, the second act of Macbeth?" And so she was saying stuff like that, until the very end. She was incredibly, with it and so that last day, I had a lot of people over to the house, and she made a connection with everyone. And among the many people that came by, Dave came by, and he came by with his wife, and they came in the bedroom, and like 20 minutes with him telling jokes, telling stories, and you couldn't believe that this is someone that was on the way out. And then, Dave it finished, and I took him and his wife out of the bedroom, and I went back to her, and I whispered to her, I said, "I knew you'd love that he had to come to you." And she looked at me like a real comic, and she said, "How'd I do? Did I do okay?" Just like a comic who had done a set. And that was literally her last day on Earth. And she had made that connection with everyone. And she was really, I used to talk about her all the time on the show. She was a really gifted comedian and just a wonderful person. And we had her memorial. And for those of you out there, if you got 90 minutes and you want to laugh and cry, but laugh a lot more, just go to YouTube and type in Adrienne Tolsch, Tolsch memorial. And we threw a memorial about a month after she passed, and it was in St. Peter's Church, and it was on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. 400 people were there, and it was there were just great laughs and great stories. And we ended with showing a video of her doing 10 minutes in Florida from a few years ago when she was at the height of her powers. And, she headlined at her own memorial, as she should have, because she really killed. And so, as I said before I introduced the video, she didn't want to get old and she didn't want to die, but she wanted to kill, so let's let her kill. And I showed the video, and it got a standing ovation. And so, so I've had many transitions, first the show and now her. And, you keep going. You keep going, and I love that people remember her, and they continue to talk to me about her, and that's what I'm here to do.
And you have on your website at BillScheft.com a part where you can buy Adrienne's art, actually.
Yes.
She was a gifted artist. Not only was she a wonderful stand-up, but I had no idea how beautiful of an artist she was.
She was a wonderful artist. She worked in many mediums, and when people came over for she used to give her art away, and she was an artist long before she became a comedian. And everybody that came to the Shiva, and we had a couple of hundred people over for it, everybody got a piece of her artwork and got to take as much as they wanted to, because she would just give the stuff away. And I love that people have this in their homes. And I mean, she was a fine artist, and she was an artist on stage.
Do you have a favorite piece?
No, it's funny that you ask, because to me, I just loved the work. I loved seeing her work. So the results were always great, but I just loved the work. I loved seeing her working, and I loved that she was so prolific. And then at the end, the last few months, she was very prolific. And I remember her saying to me, a few months before she died, she said, "I really feel like I got my chops back. I'm doing a lot." And that was very satisfying. I thought that was great. Her son, she has a son who's a wonderful musician, who came to visit her, and he's in the bedroom, and he comes out of the bedroom, and I say, "Do you need anything? You want something to drink?" He says, "No, she told me to go into the dining room and see all her new paintings. She ordered me out to go look at the new paintings and then report back to her." But that's how she was.
Is it please bear with me. Is it a good thing that you have all of this video of her and all these memories, or is it sometimes not such a good thing? I mean, a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people lose a loved one. They don't have the ability to go back and watch their loved one do stand up on stage and make people laugh.
I think it's much more good than bad, and you've dovetailed so nicely into something that I didn't even mention to you before we decided to do this. I have a cousin who's 89 years old named Joan Crone, who made her first film at the age of 89. It's a documentary on female comics and plastic surgery, and it's called Take My Nose, Please. And Adrian, it's brilliant. It's in theaters now, and Adrian and I are the executive producers, and we kind of gave her the idea. She did the movie herself. It's brilliant, and it features a lot of people that you know, a lot of people that you don't know, and it's really funny and really moving. Now, the reason I bring this up is that on 3 occasions in this film, Adrian appears as a talking head. And I've seen this movie now a couple dozen times because I go to film festivals with Joni, and I help her out, and I go to the screenings. So I've seen this movie a couple dozen times. And every time Adrian comes on screen for the first time, I have the same thought. And the thought is, I can't wait to get home and tell her how great she looked on screen. And then, of course, I realized, well, that's not going to happen when I get home. And it used to, the first couple times, it kind of stung me to have that thought and then have to correct myself. But now, it's, like I said, it's kind of this sweet thing that I go through. And, for those of you that have lost somebody, don't let anybody tell you the way it's supposed to go, because you can be flying along and you can think, something, I have this where I need to have it, and I have this person where I need to have them. And you can think that you got it, that you've reached a certain level of acceptance, and then you'll see something, you'll hear something, and then you'll be smacked down again. And you just have to respect, the mourning, and you have to, because I think it's what keeps the whole experience valid. And I know he's been on your show, Patton Oswalt, classic example of a guy. I mean, Patton Oswalt wasn't as lucky as I was. I mean, Adrian and I were married for 27 years and together for 35. Patton and his wife, who died suddenly, she was a wonderful mystery, true crime writer. and very gifted and very funny. And she died in her sleep overnight. And we've talked about this, and, you know, he has a little girl, and, you know, he took a lot of heat when he got engaged a year and a half after his wife died. And listen, you know, Patton, anybody out there, don't let anybody else tell you when you can start living again. That's the great lesson. And in the last 10 months, I've had days when I have lived a lot, and I've had days when I haven't. And that's just what this is. That's all that this is. You know, Adrian and I were an entity. You know, we were Adrian and Bill, and now, you know, I have to sort of maneuver as myself.
Now
we
you're
both
Bill.
Had our own accomplishments. Yeah. So that's what this is. And which is why, and I don't mean to get serious, that's why I deeply resent Sheryl Sandberg, you know, writing a book and telling everybody how they should be grieving, because it's a different experience, and making money off of telling everybody how they're supposed to be grieving. You know, I just think it's a uniquely personal experience. There's no playbook, and you just have to keep them close when you can really afford to keep them close, and respect all the feelings that you're going to have.
Do you think you'll date again?
Do
you think you'll date again?
Well, I stuck my toe in the water for a little while.
Please tell me you were on Tinder.
No. I would never. I could never, ever do that. I think contact the Nobel people, you know, about the Tinder thing, because it's a wonderful idea, and it removes a lot of the problems. It really does. It really sort of streamlines, and God bless them. But I would never do that, and I would never do online dating for one very simple reason, because they have not figured out with the online dating or with the Tinder, they have not figured out how to measure the intelligence of the other person. So there's just no way, and I just think that would be a giant problem for me. I mean, you really just don't want to wind up with Sheila who lives under the sink. You know, you really don't. You don't. And not that there's anything wrong with
Sheila's
living
probably
under
a fine
the sink.
lady. No,
Yeah. But
for Bill, who lives under the stairs. See, they would make a great couple.
Right. That's right.
Not you,
exactly
Bill, a
right.
different Bill.
No, that's right. Or it could be me. The stairs look good. But yeah, I did a bit of it, and it was just fine. But then every once in a while, you come to the realization, well, I don't think I'm finished saying goodbye yet.
Sure.
So I don't think I can really live in two places at once. I don't think that, and I don't think it's fair to the other person. So that's what happened. You know, it's funny because I'm pretty sure, I know he's been on the show, but my buddy Larry Amorose, who was Adrian's and my best friend, I remember calling Larry, and I said to him, you know, it's been 17 weeks after she died. I said, it's been 17 weeks. I said, not one woman has shown up at my apartment with a casserole. And Larry said, that's week 19, which I thought was great.
Well, you know, I have a friend, a dear friend, who's in a very similar situation to you right now. But this has been, it's a little bit more current. And he texted me a couple of weeks ago and said, do you know so-and-so a person? They just friended me on Facebook. And I go, that's the new casserole lady. That's exactly what I told him. I said, you have to be careful about who you friend on social media now, because there sadly are some very lonely people out there, and they know you're available. Boom, you're a target.
Right. And I don't, the thing is what is it? Is it loneliness, or is it what you've been deprived, or is it, I mean, I don't know. And you sort of, by you, I mean me, you have to kind of maneuver through all that. The irony is that before I met Adrian, I was hugely unsuccessful with the opposite sex. I mean, I was horrible because I was one of those guys who was tremendous on the first date. I mean, you know, funny and witty and urbane and the whole thing. And then on the second date, around midway through the date, you know, the woman would look across the dinner table and just see the neediness in my eyes and just say, I got to get out of here because this guy, and it wasn't a, you know, lascivious Harvey Weinstein thing. It was just, please, be my companion. It was so needy, and they would just run screaming into the night. And so I didn't know anything about women except how to scare them off. And then, you know, I met Adrian, and we met at Catch a Rising Star together, and we had this common gathering place, and we went through the bumps and whatever that was, and all of a sudden we get to be steady boyfriend and girlfriend, and we move in together, and then she finally agrees to marry me, and all of a sudden I'm this expert on women. You know, guys coming to me, how did you do it? It's like, I don't know. I mean, I just kind of stopped scaring other women and just scared one in particular who wasn't that scared.
No, you found the right one.
That was my secret.
Yeah, well, you found the right one, and that doesn't happen to everybody, right. Bill. You know, you are lucky, so lucky that you have Adrian. You have her in your heart forever. A lot of people never get that opportunity. They never do.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, because when she was in the hospital very soon after she went in the hospital for the last time, she knew the score. I knew the score. So we had the conversations that we needed to have. And the thing was is that, you know, as I told her, you're never going to lose me. And but she would tell her girlfriends that she was worried about me. And then I would say, I hear you telling the girls that you're worried about me. And she would say, oh, no, I'm just worried about all that you have to do now. And I knew that that's not what she meant. I knew that she meant that she would go, you know, she would pass on. And I would be unable to fill what that was. And eventually I'll come to the conclusion that I'm not going to fill that. Right. And that I can kind of start, but I don't know. I might not. And that's okay. That's okay too. And I didn't know we were going to go down this road, but that's fine. I'm better off than 99% of the guys that lose their wives. And the reason why I am is because I have many, many very, very close women friends. So I have that female energy around me. Yeah. And I also have my niece living with me. I've had my niece living with me for the last 6 months. And my niece is 29 years old. She is the gorgeous adopted Korean daughter of my sister. And as I tell people, she's been living with me long enough now so the doormen believe she actually is my niece. And so it's just tremendous to have, you know, you're not alone. You have somebody in your apartment, and it's good morning, good evening, I love you. You have that every day. Mm-hmm. And she has it too. And I'll just tell you one quick story about her. Like I said, she's 20, and she's got a pet rabbit. I mean, if this was 30 years ago, I could pitch this show to Fox. So she's got this pet rabbit named Albert, and she's a fashion designer. Her name is Allie, and she's a fashion designer. So on Monday, I leave the house earlier than her, and because I walk across Central Park to go see my shrink, which is the most New York Jewish thing you can do, walk across Central Park to see your shrink. Mm-hmm. So I leave early, and she comes back later that night, and I said, how was work? She said, I was getting ready to leave, and I left the cage open, and Albert got out, and I was looking for him for 20 minutes, so I was late to work. And then I got into work, and I have to go tell my supervisor why I'm late. So I go to my supervisor, and I say to her, I'm sorry I'm late. Albert got out of his cage, and it took me 20 minutes to find him. And her supervisor said, and Albert is your uncle that you live with? Which is really so close to the way things are in the house. So she is a gift to me every day.
Oh, that is wonderful. Let's change subjects a little bit because I know that you're a wonderful writer and you have a new novel, and I want to hear all about it.
Okay, I just finished this novel. Now, this is a great story, Bond, and this is something that is right up your alley and the people you work with, because the thing about the Bob and Tom show,
yes,
and my older brother knew about it before I did, and my older brother was a big fan of comedy, and he used to say to me, have you heard these guys, Bob and Tom? And because I'm in Manhattan and the show didn't come, I said, no. He says, well, they're the best, and they always have comics on, and it's great. And I didn't meet you and the guys until my first novel came out in 2002, The Ringer. And that's when I met you guys, and I knew, because if you're a comic or a writer, you do a lot of radio. You do a lot of morning radio, and 90% of it is absolute nonsense, and it's guys who are resentful because they think they're funny and whatever agenda, or it's guys that don't listen, and it's just nonsense. It's just noise. So I get on this thing with you guys, and all of a sudden it's like, well, where has this show been my whole life? And I became a huge fan and a big friend of the show. I knew that you guys knew all the comics, and whenever they came through, they did the show. So, and I was a comic for 13 years. That's how I met Adrian, and we met at Catch Rising Star. So the Letterman show's coming to an end, and a woman named Nikki Fink, who had a big website called Deadline Hollywood, and it was a very, very popular show business, gossip, journalism site, and she was great. She was really great. So she left that site, and she called me, and she said, I'm starting a new site. It's called Hollywood Dementia, and it's just show business fiction. It's not real stuff, it's fiction. And will you write for me? And I said, I will, as soon as the show ends. I promise I'll write you something. So the show ends in May, and now I got to set out to write something for Nikki Fink. And I think, well, I don't just want to write one piece and have it up for a week and have it go away. And I said, let me see if I can come up with a refillable, like a character that I can try and serialize. So I came up with this character, this bust-out comic, Tommy Dash. Now think Louis C.K. without any self-awareness or a career. And this is a guy that is he's 60 years old, and he's trying to get his career back by making amends to all the people he's pissed off in show business, and the list is endless. So the first piece I wrote was Tommy Dash, and he's got to apologize to Clint Eastwood because he's going to audition for a role in his new movie, and he has to apologize for ruining a shoot years ago. And so I tell this story based on something that happened to a good friend of yours and mine, the late Richard Jeni, who got cast in a Clint Eastwood movie and almost, blew the budget for the whole movie because he showed up late and he was a wise guy. And so I tell this story, and Nikki Fink says, this is great, let me have more. So I start writing these installments, and some of them are based on things that happened to me. Some of them I made up, some of them based on stuff that happened. And I ended up writing about 10 installments for her, and it was really popular. And then I realized, geez, I got 30,000 words here. That's almost half a book. So I realized I can't post a whole book on the internet because then nobody will ever buy it because it's all there already. Yeah. So I pulled away from her, and I wrote the second half of the book in the last year. I wrote it a lot of it in a year, and then when Adrian got sick, I had to stop writing it for a while. So I went back to it last May, and I literally just finished it. And it's called Is It Everything I Said? Tommy Dash apologizes. And it's all these, these incidents of people that he has to make amends to. And at one point he gets a job on a sitcom. And it's a character that he is just relentlessly unapologetic and yet just has to keep apologizing to people. He can't get out of his own way. I've had a lot of fun writing it, and now I'm done with it and just kind of polishing it up. But I'm really, it was so much fun writing the character and, hearkening back to the days when I was a stand-up and some of the screw-ups that I did and that other people did. And
is there one particular antidote that you can share that maybe Tommy Dash did that you did?
Oh, well, I remember there was one. Well, yeah, of course. There was, I'll tell you this one story that actually happened. So it's 1983 or 84. I want to say, no, it's 84. And I get a call. It's 84. From the head of casting at Paramount. The head. Gretchen Rennell was her name. And she calls me at my house. And she says, this is Gretchen Rennell from Paramount. And we saw some videotape of you, and we would like you to come in and see us. Well, first of all, it's 1984. Who had videotape on anything? I didn't even know I didn't even know there was videotape on me. I didn't know what she was talking. I said, okay, so somebody had filmed me somewhere. Mm-hmm. So now she is the head of casting at Paramount. So I'm going to go see her, but sharp mind that I was back then, I decide to schedule my appointment with her right after a shrink appointment. So I left this shrink appointment feeling like 2 cents and feeling anything but funny and anything but with it and anything but desirable. And and comics have told you, when you meet with somebody in the movie business or in television for an interview and you're a comic, what they want is they want you to just come in and perform. They want you to come into the office and pick up the stapler and go, hello. They want you to do that. They want you to make fun of their time. They just want to be entertained. They just want you to go nuts. They don't want to. Yeah, they don't want a serious. Well, I come in there and I couldn't have been more serious. And here's the interview. Gretchen Rennell says to me, listen, we saw some tape of you. We think you're very funny. And we just want to know that if we come across anything that we think you'd be right for, would you come in and read for us? Now, there's only one answer to that. There's only one answer. And the answer is sure.
Sure.
That's the only answer. There's no other possible answer when the head of casting asks you a question like that. Well, here's what I said to her. All right, let me just say one thing now. I'm not a clown, and I don't want to be treated like a clown. If you come across something like my friend Paul Reiser did in Diner, yeah, that would be great. But I'm not a clown, and I don't want to be treated as a clown. And that was my answer. And she said, thank you very much. And I left, and Adrian had just moved in with me. Mm-hmm. So I come back to the house, and Adrian says, how did it go at Paramount? And I said, went great. You won't believe this. I was so great. They want me to come in and read. If they come up with something for me like a movie, they want me to come in and read for it. And I told them, that's fine, but I don't want to be treated like a clown, and I would like something like Paul Reiser had in Diner. And she looked at me and she said, what are you, a fucking idiot? What did you do? And now I realize slowly that I may have been a little grandiose with this woman. So
I'm going to guess. Oh, I was going to say, I'm going to guess you didn't get a call.
No, I didn't get a I didn't get a call. I didn't get it. I called. I wrote. I said, I'm sorry. I've been on some new medication. I just, and never, ever happened to get. So that, that's an example of the things that I did early on. So that's one of the stories. And then I tell some stories from the road. Like, I think I might have even told, no, I don't think I ever told this on your show about when I was playing in Milwaukee and the guy picks me up I get picked up at the airport by a stretch limo in Milwaukee, and I think, this is pretty good. Well, the problem was the chauffeur of the stretch limo was the owner of the club, and this was his day job. So I say to him, what hotel am I staying at? He says, don't worry, we got something for you. That's not the right answer. So they put me in, and I know comics come by and they talk about the condos, and they put me in a place, and there's, it's this house, and there's no lock on the door, and there's no electricity, there's no cable, and there's somebody's belongings all over the house. There's his medication is in the medicine, this drawer, and it turned out that the guy whose house it was had been murdered like a week before. And, the place was free. And that's where they put me, and they didn't tell me. And I find out, and I go to the owner, and I say, you put me in a dead guy's apartment? And he said, did they put the crime scene tape back up? I mean, he just, not, I'm sorry, not anything. And I said, I'm not going to stay there. Put me in a hotel. And he fired me. He said, you've done nothing but complain since you got here. And that's the kind of stuff that used to happen to me. All comics have these stories.
But did he have good drugs? No, I'm just kidding.
Sadly, I mean, look, I'm a guy, when I was drinking and I was using, I was a guy, when I came to your house, my first stop was your medicine cabinet.
Oh, really?
That was my first stop. I wasn't a complete scumbag. I would leave enough pills for you to get back to the pharmacy. But I would take everything. This guy had some blood pressure. There was nothing you or I could use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
not that I do
that's
but
the sad part of the story. Yeah.
I know
so it's a lot of that stuff. It's a lot of stuff, from the 80s and 90s, and it's a guy trying to get it back together. And I just had a great time. It was, a lovely distraction for me.
Sure.
So that's the latest. I mean,
when is it going to be out? Is it everything I said? Tommy Dash apologizes.
Well, I get, my agent. You give it to my agent, and then she sends it out. And ideally, we're talking about a year from now. But the last book that I promoted on your show, that I was, you guys were nice enough to have me on 2 days in a row for all 4 hours. It was a dream. Was Shrink Thyself, and that came out a few years ago. That came out. Wow, that came out about 3 years ago, and that's about a guy who decides to leave therapy and live an unexamined life. And the second that he makes that decision, things start happening to him that would drive anybody screaming back into therapy. And that was, I had a lot of fun with that. That was great fun for me to write as well.
Do you think you would ever leave therapy?
Well, I did. I did leave therapy.
Did you leave, or did they say you were cured? I've had that.
No, no. It's a self-diagnosed disease. I knew enough to know when I would need to come back, and I did it for so long that by the time I left, I had such respect for the process that I kind of knew how to do it on myself. But then, of course, your wife dies,
right.
And then, I don't think I know. So back in.
Okay.
And but so that's where, and he's Irish. He's an Irish shrink, which is, for me to be seeing an Irish, but he is. I love this guy. He's really not from this earth, and he's one of these guys that I've been seeing him now, and we get along so well that he got into a car accident in his rental car a few months ago, and I do nothing but rent cars, so I kept sort of walking him through how to get out of having to pay for the damage to the car. And so, of course, that would take up the first 15 minutes of the session, and then we would, get around to me and my grieving.
You're paying him for that, right?
It was great. Yeah, I understand that. I have some money coming back. I really do have some money coming back.
I would think. Let's talk about music a little bit. A lot of people may or may not know that you're quite the musician as well.
Yeah, I have a band called the Truants, and we play all around New York and the tri-state area, and it's we play British Invasion and garage rock covers and nothing after 1967. And I was my older brother was a wonderful drummer and was in a band in high school, and the band made one album, and the album turned out to be very valuable. So
what was the name of the album and the band?
The album was called Calm Before, and the group was The Rising Storm, and that's 1967, and it's 50 years later, and they were the subject of a huge feature in the Sunday New York Times 3 months ago. Record collectors still get them together. They have this kind of cult following, and so I grew up listening to that music, and and my second novel called Time Won't Let Me, which is about a garage band that tries to reunite when its album becomes valuable, and of course the guys are older and they can't get out of their own way to do it. When I wrote that book, which I promoted on your show, and you were lovely enough to promote it, I got a lot of letters from people saying, this is the most accurate book about a band that I've ever read. And I had never been in a band. And so it made me, at 50 and then 53, start thinking about, I think I want to start a band. And I started a band at 53, and I wanted to play the music that I wanted to play. And I found a lot of like-minded guys, and we have a ball, and the people that come to see us, everybody says the same thing. My friends say to me, look, I knew you guys would be good. I didn't know you'd be this good. And the other thing that people say is, I've never seen guys having so much fun being up there, because we're doing the stuff we want to do as we want to do. And it's been great for me. I mean, look, I'm going to be like any guy in a band, and I'm going to tell you, we don't work enough. We don't get paid enough. Why aren't we working every weekend at private parties? Why? But it is, and the guys will tell you, no, and this is so interesting because, you guys do 4 hours every day. And you know how fast that can pass, the 4 hours, and you know how slowly it can pass. But here's the thing about playing music. It always passes fast. That always passes. When you got to do 3 sets, 3-hour sets, and, set up and break down, it just, however long it takes you to set everything up, and it's like, Jesus, I'm exhausted. We haven't even played our first note. And then it starts, and then the next thing you look down at the sheet, at the set list, wait a minute, we got 2 songs left. What didn't this? It's really, time never passes as quickly as it does on stage for me with my guys, and it's been a great thing. And Adrienne, oh my God, she loved that band, and she said, the best part is seeing how happy you are up there, and so I think about that.
What do you play? What instrument?
If you need us, we're the Truants, and our website is thetruantslive.com, and if you got a 60th birthday, if you've got a 50th reunion coming up, I mean, we are the band for you, and we will travel, and we got legit guys.
Well, what instrument do you play,
the
Bill?
old joke,
Bill,
huh?
what instrument do you play?
I'm the drummer.
Okay.
And you know the old joke, what do you call a guy who likes to hang out with musicians? A drummer. You know, these guys, I play with real musicians, and we all sing, so we get the harmonies down, and it's just, it's been one of the great things I've done, and I started doing it 7 years ago.
That's
I started
great.
doing it at 53, yeah.
Do you do a song called Do the Freddie?
We don't do the Freddie. We don't do anything by Freddie. I do a joke about. I say to I give all these fake upcoming gigs, and I say we have a gig upcoming next month. We'll be playing we'll be as part of the off-Broadway musical Freddie and the Dreamers Mania. It's 90 minutes, 2 songs. Because, they only had 2 hits. They had Do the Freddie and I'm Telling You Now were their 2 hits.
We had a whole show on this last week. That's why I brought it up, because Tom, that's whenever you say something about a dance song, he'll always go, Do the Freddie. And I'm,
Right.
what? Because he goes, that's the only dance I know. He has to have all the instructions to the dance in the song. And his go-to,
Right.
it's not Cupid Shuffle or whatever it is. I mean, none of these, you know, he goes to Hokey Pokey and Do the Freddie.
Right. Do the Freddie, and also around that same time, Soupy Sales only hit Do the Mouse.
Oh, I don't remember that one.
Oh, well, yeah, you can cough that up to Tom, and he'll know what you're talking about.
Do the Mouse, Soupy Sales. May he rest in peace. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Soupy Sales. I'm writing that down because I don't want to forget.
Please do.
Yes. Well, I think it's wonderful that you have that outlet. The music is always, music brings people together. I mean, it's just one of those things that, sadly, in the news, it's been a horrible thing right now, but mostly speaking, it is a way to connect. And I don't know if you saw the Gator game over the weekend when they did the Tom Petty thing. Oh, my gosh. Didn't that give you chills? That was so amazing.
Well, yes, it did. And here's the thing about that, and it's terrible when guys like that die. But I'll never forget what my mother said, and my mother's 94, when Frank Sinatra died, and of course for 4 days, all they played were Frank Sinatra songs. Every radio, for 4 days this went on. And I said to my mom, how about this with the 4 days of Frank Sinatra music? And she said, I just find it so nourishing. And that's the great thing. I mean, of course, it's sad when anybody passes, but the fact that the legacy is something that is so nourishing, that has different meaning for people of all ages. I mean, I can't tell you what it's like. I mean, I don't want to bring it back to myself, but I have no choice. I'm at when we do a truants gig, and you look out in the audience, okay, there's a lot of guys my age, but you see kids, and they know every lyric to a Beatles song, to a Dave Clark 5 song, to a Zombie song, and you're saying, wait a minute, this is way. But it's that it is transcendent. It is a transcendent language.
Yeah, and I have a daughter who's 15 years old, and she knows lyrics to songs I don't even know. She was singing a Queen song the other day, and I go, where did you hear that? She goes, Mom, this is from your era. You should know this song. But they do. They're really attracted to the classic rock. And she even thanked me right after this Tom Petty incident. She thanked me in the car and said, Mom, I'm so glad you took me to see the Rolling Stones. I would have hated the fact that one of those guys dies and I'd never seen them on stage. I wish I'd gone with you to see Tom Petty in May. I mean, it's pretty interesting that a girl at 15 is talking about that and not, a Taylor Swift show or something. I was pretty amazed that you're right. Tom Petty does cross a lot of genres. Who do you have a band that you go to all the time? Is it a Beatles thing? Is it a band you've seen a lot live, or have you wanted to see live that you really enjoy?
Well, this is I don't know if it's interesting about me. It might be odd. I've been to very, very few live. I've never been to an arena concert because I just don't think that I would be able to take in that experience. But a couple things. First of all, a lot of people I know saw Paul McCartney on this last run at Madison Square Garden, and they were all around my age, and every one of them said the same thing. 3 hours, he's 75 years old, 3 hours, he does not stop. He does not stop, and they all said the same thing. And he does not take one sip of water. And everybody kept saying this. So finally I asked somebody who really knows the Beatles. I mean, I know them, but there's people that really know them.
Right.
And I said, everybody's telling me that Paul McCartney is on stage for 3.5 hours, doesn't take a sip of water. And the guy said to me, well, you know where that's from, don't you? I said, no. He said, Brian Epstein, years ago, told them, do not drink water on stage. It looks unprofessional. So, of course, that's carried over with him. He's 75. I mean, I can't get through a set without drinking a quart of water, you know. But so that I will say that when I was in terms of live, I'm going to give you a big surprise answer.
Okay.
In terms of live performers. So when I was in high school, a friend of mine introduced me to the band Tower of Power, and I loved them, and I bought all their records, and always, whenever a new one came out, and I just loved them. And it's not like the other music that I listened to, which was, the British Invasion, the garage stuff, but I did love soul music, and I loved what they did. So now I'm a comic, and a guy calls me and says, who ran the Bottom Line, which was a great club in Manhattan downtown. And he says, do you want to open for Tower Power? And I went, are you kidding me? They're my favorite band. So I go down there, and it was a great room. It sat 500 people. And I get up there, and I did really well. And the leader of the band, Emilio Castillo, comes up to me and he says, how did you do that? He said, we've had great comics open for us, and they get booed off the stage. How did you do that? I said, because I came out there, and they knew I was one of them. They knew I just wanted to get the hell off and see the show, and I made that clear early on. And so I said, look, you just got to put up with it for 20 minutes, and it was great. Well, at the time, they had not had a record deal for 10 years. So 3 months later, they come back to New York, and they call me, and they say, will you come and open for us? So I opened for them again, and they got a record deal that night. And I opened for them another 4 or 5 times, and I was their good luck charm. And it was so gratifying to me that I had just a little piece of a band that had given me so much pleasure when I was growing up. So that's what I think of when I think of seeing live music. I like to go see jazz, and I like, I'll go if a friend's in a band. I mean, to me, that's, at this stage, it's just all about the support. I mean, the big famous people, they have all the support they need. Now, the other thing is, and I can be a little snobbish about this because I had the luxury of being able to stand off on the side for 24 years
Paul
to see every great band perform on the Letterman show.
Right. That's true.
So I think if I hadn't had that experience, I think I might be a guy sitting in the upper loge at Madison Square Garden, watching McCartney or doing that. But I could get my fill out of seeing a band do one song or do, and I saw a lot of people come through Letterman, and a lot of it was really thrilling for me. And I remember the first time I ever saw Green Day, and I just thought, wow, these guys, they're making so much. I had seen a lot of the new bands, and I thought, well, this isn't for me. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not for me. And then I see them, and it's like, wow. I remember the first time I saw Janelle Monáe, and I went up to her afterwards, and I said, I've been here for, at the time, 20 years. I said, you're the best musical act they've ever had on this show. And she was.
Wow.
So it's one of those things where anybody that listens to music, you go along and you're kind of nourished by it, again, using my mother's words, and it's a big part of your life and it fulfills you in many ways. And then you see like U2, or you see somebody that really is transcendent, and you go, oh, I get why they're so big. I mean, I don't like Bruce Springsteen, but I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I don't like U2, but I get it. I get why every successful act is successful. Adrian used to say to me, I can explain to you why every big musical act is big except David Bowie. She could never explain David Bowie.
I like David Bowie. We are about out of time, so let's quickly talk about some of the projects you have coming up, because I believe you're working on your own podcast or satellite radio show.
I'm working on a couple of radio projects. Myself and Barbara Gaines, the longtime Letterman producer, my best friend, we're working on 2 radio projects. One is where I'm doing your thing. I'm going to host with another woman, very funny woman named Susan Korn, and we interview comics just about relationships. It's all about relationships. And because, comics, when it comes to relationships, all of a sudden they can get deadly serious. And it's sort of fascinating to maneuver through that world. They can be very funny, but it is also it's the ultimate struggle for a comic and people in the comic. So I'm working on that, and and Barbara and I are producing a radio series for Julie Halston, who's a hilarious. You need to have her on the show.
I would love to.
She's a Broadway actress, really deeply funny. She performed at Adrian's memorial. She's a good friend. She's a giant talent, and we're we're putting together a show for her. And so I'm doing that, and working on little things here and there, and just keeping busy and trying to stay out of my own way.
Well, you're never in our way, and we'd love to have you on the show again. So be sure and.
Well, anytime. I mean, look, this was. I mean, it was. I had no doubt that this was going to be great, spending a little time with you. But there's you guys, Bob and Tom. There's that whole, and then there's just everything else on the radio for me in terms of the stuff I've done. It just, I don't know what it is. It's just it's the welcoming and the fact that they just understand. They understand when a comic or somebody in the comedy realm comes on, there's great generosity, and they get out of the way. And it's, I mean, I've just always, I never walked away from an appearance on your show thinking, oh, I wish I'd gotten that better, or I always came away very satisfied. And for, we're just built on, we run on self-loathing. I mean, that's just unlike me to come away from something and say, hey, you know what, I'm pleased with that. I feel good about that. But that was always my experience with you guys.
Well, I'm always
pleased. It always will be.
Always
and
pleased.
Especially you, and I know, and you and I know the tightrope that you have so artfully walked on that show. And I think that everybody knows it and everybody appreciates it, and you've done it with tremendous humor and great humility, and it's always just right. And it's that's and we all appreciate that.
Well, you better stop, or like Dave Letterman, you're going to make me cry. Bill Scheft has been my guest. Thank you so much, Bill. I would love to check back with you.
My pleasure,
Maybe
Kristi.
next year when the novel comes out, we'll follow up with you.
That would be lovely. Anytime.
Yes.
What about tomorrow?
Okay. I'm not doing anything tomorrow. And I'd love to visit
All right,
you in New
sweetie.
York and take you to lunch or something, because I'm going to be, I think
That
I'm going
would
to be
be
in the
great.
city before the end of the year. Okay?
Please let me know.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Right.
I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I did. Bill Scheft is one in a million. Love that man. We have some exciting things coming up. Of course, don't forget we have Kristi Lee Uninterrupted merchandise on the way. And coming up in the next couple of weeks, we have Dr. Will Miller, another former stand-up comic. He's going to be joining us and talk about where we stand in the world right now. A lot of weird things going on. I'm not really liking the karma, so I need Will to come in here and make it all better for us because he's so good at doing that. As I always say, tell all your friends about the show. You can find us, of course, on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or, of course, the website, KristiLeeNews.com. Until next week, more importantly than ever, be kind.